Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Curious by Nature episode with Deep Roots. I'm your host, Sydney Ross, and we have a great show for you today. Whether you're tuning in live via Zoom or listening to the recording on YouTube or in our podcast format, we're so happy you're here and thanks for joining us. So, I'm sitting here in Kansas City right now, and it is the beginning of November, and I'm seeing some blooms in my garden still. I'm curious what you all are seeing in your yards as well. So if you feel like it, let us know where you're tuning in from and what you see blooming or what's of interest in your garden here in the chat. I'll take a look at your answers a little bit later on. I'd like to thank our sponsors for today's episode, Johnson County Park and Recreation District and Missouri Department of Conservation, for connecting our communities to our natural lands and resources. Also, we appreciate donors like you that make programs like this possible. Thank you so much. Every first Friday at 1 p.m., you can join me at the Anita B. Gordon Conservation Discovery Center for our Native Landscape Chat. This is a naturalist walk and native garden guidance free workshop, or more like a free program, where we tour the gardens at the Discovery Center and look at things that are in season or of interest. So this month, we're looking at what gardens look like in autumn and how to plan for that for the next growing season, as well as discussing both food and shelter for our native plants for our native fauna. I hope you'll join us. Again, this is a free program and you can register online at deeproots.org. Looking forward to a beautiful day tomorrow walking around the grounds. Our annual Native Plant Conference, Planet Native, is almost here, just a couple months away. This time it'll be February 10th through 11th, 2026, right here in Kansas City at the Kauffman Foundation, as well as the Anita B. Gorman Conservation Discovery Center. I want to highlight a couple of the speakers that'll be participating in next year's event. Of the 21 concurrent speakers that come from all over, these are native plant and native landscape experts. We have two that I'm highlighting today, including Luke and Linda Black Elk. You may be familiar with them. I'm pretty darn excited. They'll be presenting on gifts that keep giving, edible and medicinal perennials. They are food sovereignty activists and teachers of traditional plant knowledge, gardening, food preservation, and foraging. Another speaker that'll be presenting is Jesse Nippert. He is a grassland ecologist at the Konza Prairie Biological Station, where he specializes in plant physiology. He's discussing deciduous shrubs and prairies and how we need to adjust management strategies in light of our changing climate, which, as you'll see in today's program on prescribed fire, is very important and very timely. So our early bird registration is open now, where you can save $60 on the full conference price. And that deadline for early bird registration is Sunday, November 16th. I hope to see you there. Join us on November 20th at 6 p.m. for a similar episode to today, but with a new guest expert, Colton Ridenauer, as he discusses prescribed fire practices with Johnson County Park and Recreation District. This is our evening broadcast time, so if you've tuned in today, the video footage will look similar, or if you're listening to it in podcast version or on YouTube, this next episode, you'll see the recording will be the Q&A portion of the next episode. So it'll be a really good time and a really great opportunity for landowners and different municipalities to bring their questions to talk with our guest experts. As always, this webinar will be recorded and all resources available following today's event. I'll be sending you an email with links to the different events and programs, as well as resources discussed in today's show. Don't forget, drop your comments in the chat and put your questions in the Q&A. At the end of our program today, during the Q&A, we'll pause and do a little pop quiz. And let me show you what one lucky winner will win today. I have this awesome poster, Smokey the Bear poster. Why be careful with fire in the forest? Pick a reason. So I hope you'll stick around and maybe you'll be the lucky winner to win today's prize. Okay. So I'd like to introduce our today's guest expert, Matt Garrett, who's the Natural Resource Manager for the Gold Medal Award-winning Johnson County Park and Recreation District. He's dedicated his entire career to environmental education and natural resource management in the Kansas City region. Matt's a regional conservation leader focused on large-scale prairie restoration, invasive plant removal, and conservation planning. In his spare time, he mountain bikes and throws frisbees to his blue heeler, Anna. Matt, I'd like to welcome you to the virtual stage. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here again.
Welcome, Matt. I know you are in the thick of it right now. The work never ends in conservation, does it? But I want to ask, what are some of the projects that you are either looking forward to as we shift into the next season, or just some exciting things that you and your team are working on right now?
Yeah, well, for today's episode, we're in the middle of prepping for woodland fires and we're in the middle of prepping for our dormant season prairie fires. So people are out on tractors and mowers and we're out flagging corridors and getting fire lines ready. So we're doing some of that. We're doing habitat surveys for possible trail improvements. And we're removing a lot of bush honeysuckle. So we are, I would say the fall is one of our busiest times of the year.
I believe it. And as I've seen creating today's program, there's so much planning that goes into prescribed fire and invasive species removal in general. So I wish you and your team the best of luck for a very busy but productive season ahead.
Yeah, it's great. It's a weird time of year. All the people in the comments mentioning the plants they're seeing, and we're still seeing box turtles, out moving in the forest. So it's just a wild fall.
It's pretty wild. Thanks, climate change. So all right. Well, we have a great show. Thank you again, Matt, for being our guest expert today. We're going to go ahead and get started, everyone. So I hope you enjoy today's episode on prescribed fire practices, both in the dormant and growing season with Johnson County Parks and Recreation District. Enjoy. People have shaped landscapes for millennia through agriculture, infrastructure, and resource management. Throughout human history, many cultures used periodic, intentional burning to promote ecological diversity. These cultural burns supported hunting, foraging, and farming practices and helped maintain balanced, resilient ecosystems. The landscapes we know today were deeply influenced by generations of indigenous land stewardship, with cultural burning as one of the most effective and sustainable tools. Periodic fire renews the land, fostering the diversity that sustains both wildlife and people. In the Midwest, fire has long played a crucial role in maintaining grassland habitats like the iconic tallgrass prairie. Fire clears away excess plant material and recycles nutrients back into the soil. Without it, dead vegetation builds up, increasing the risk of severe wildfires, which are becoming more common with climate change. According to the Nature Conservancy, prescribed fire can reduce wildfire severity by up to 62%. When burns are suppressed, shrubs and trees begin to take over. This is a natural part of ecological succession, but as woody plants spread across prairies, they shade and outcompete native grasses and wildflowers. Trees can certainly be beneficial, providing shade, capturing carbon, and reducing pollution. But through the slow green glacier effect, combined with industrial agriculture, our grasslands are disappearing at an alarming rate. Tallgrass prairies once covered 170 million acres across parts of 14 states. Today, they're considered an endangered biome, with less than 4% remaining. In Missouri, less than 1% of our original prairies persist. Most remnant prairies were lost to plowing and development, making it even more critical to protect what's left through invasive species management and prescribed burns. Fortunately, the practice of prescribed fire is being rekindled. Many municipalities, land managers, and private landowners now recognize its value. Earlier this year, I joined the Natural Resource Crew at the Johnson County Parks and Recreation District to learn firsthand about best practices for prescribed burning and to see how this ancient tool continues to shape and sustain our landscapes today.
I'm Matt Garrett, Natural Resource Manager for the Johnson County Park District, and we are at the Cedar Niles Old Growth Prairie today. It's the largest prairie in our system that has all the qualities of an old remnant, old growth system. and it hasn't been burned in 2 seasons, and so it's been hayed frequently, but this is the first fire on it, I believe, in 4 years. And so it's got heavy thatch, and it's going to be a good fire today. We're looking to wrap up our fire season. So the Flood Hills Smoke Management Plan shuts us down April 1st. And so this unit is going to be the last one we take on this year. And as spring is beginning to pop and forbs are beginning to come up, we wouldn't want to really burn past this as well. So we have a priority list of fires for the year. And so we rank them by need and timing and benefits from each of the fires. And so every region has a fire priority list. And so if for some reason a specific unit, the prescription is not good, it's generally going to mean prescription is not good for anything in that area that day. But if it's specific to a trail or road, we'd move to a unit where you'd have maybe the opposite weather conditions, where it'd be okay to have the smoke going that way. So if it's just we're out of wind prescription, we're done. So if it's over 15 mile an hour gusts, we're not, if the weather prescription isn't right, or we don't have the right staffing. So if we have too few people or the equipment's not working, it's very hard to tell people that we're not burning, but you have to. And so if humidity is dropped, or the wind is picked up and you have to demobilize a bunch of people that are ready to get something done, but it's safe and the right thing to do. So that's always, as a burn boss, you have to be ready to shut things down and call it, regardless of people's willingness to do the work. Restoration efforts are super important for Johnson County and specifically this site, because when we began management here, it was covered in hundreds of cedar trees, thousands of cedar trees. And we've really aggressively, it's in our mission to make sure we take care of the land we have and make sure it's as diverse and ecologically sound as possible. And so this unit is something for the last decade I've been burning, removing trees, removing invasive species, and it's in pretty good shape. So it's a nice unit. And we see scissortail flycatchers, we see eastern meadowlarks. We got a lot of good bird species and herp species here, slender glass lizards. So we have to get this fire in today before all of the birds begin nesting in April and May, and the herps are really out. So this is really our last chance at getting this done. We focus a lot of our efforts on dormant season fire, which you mentioned. And I would say that is going to be the window of late fall into very early spring, where plants are not actively growing. And so if you burn into the spring when plants are actively growing, you tend to make woody invasives angry, or happy, I guess. And so the dogwoods and the sumacs and the grasses, the aggressive warm season grasses, are all like a spring fire. Well, dormant season burning promotes stability. And so you're not dumping nutrients into the ecosystem and creating a feedback loop that is creating more problems. So for really well-balanced prairies, burning in the dormant season is an appropriate action to promote the stability of a really well-organized ecological sequence that's happening in these old growth units we have in some of our early restorations. And so it promotes stability and less chaos. So we see really nice trends of prescribed fires conducted during the dormant season, making really floristically strong, high-quality, resilient prairies. Prairies that are burned really hot in late spring tend to end up being giant warm season grasses and woody invasives.
How can a landowner or just an individual who wants to learn how to do safe prescribed fires, who can they get involved with? How can they learn these practices firsthand?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say first, probably reach out, if you're in Kansas, to a prescribed burn association and find friends and neighbors that are already working together to do this and have resources. Or find a nonprofit locally, like Native Lands or KC Wildlands, that might be putting fire down on either public or private land as well. And so you're going to need to accrue some sort of tools to be able to break the fire triangle. So you need to be able to have water available or leaf blowers. So you need some sort of suppression equipment. And there's lots of DIY stuff you can do all over YouTube on how you can manage fires yourself. So I know folks that have private ground that they may start a fire and eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and let it sit on their tailgate of their truck and watch it work across a landscape. And so it's private fires can be a lot more relaxed than the liability of a public fire. So I think it's a good opportunity to meet your neighbors and to find resources that are available collectively from a burn association, and then it's leaf blowers and backpack sprayers, and if you got a side-by-side, maybe some sort of an electric sprayer for the back of that, things like that, versus how scaled up some large agencies are with brush trucks and UTVs and things like that.
Deep Roots has an archive of webinars covering prescribed fire practices that you can review on deeproots.org. There are also regional associations, nonprofits, and state government agencies that teach individuals hands-on how to perform safe prescribed burns. We reached out to our friends at Native Lands Restoration Collaborative in Douglas County, Kansas, to see how easy it is for an individual to get involved with a burn, even if they have no experience.
Hi, I'm Courtney and this is Ryan, and we're Native Lands Restoration Collaborative. You can join our burn team as a volunteer all winter. We love having people out to learn about fire with us. All you have to do is email us at nativelandsks@gmail.com. We'll provide you all the equipment and training that you need. We would love to have you out on the land with us this burn season. Reach out if you have any questions.
My name is Matt Deere. I'm a natural resource technician with Johns County Park and Rec District. So burning dormant season, everything's gone underground, it's dormant. We're not harming those plants. We're just burning off all that thatch and the old growth so those plants can grow through fresh dirt. We don't have to worry about them being covered up by the old thatch. We're not hurting any herps, amphibians, anything like that. They're not going to be running through the fire because everybody's sleeping through the winter. So this is prime time to burn right now. But during the dormant season, it really helps get all that ground open up and kind of wake that seed bank up so those plants can come through primed and ready for the growing season.
When you're running fire across a landscape, it's in a prescription where it's not as hot, where we're sterilizing soil. And so we're generally, within our prescriptions, running pretty cool fires that are creeping across the landscape. And they're going to be top killing woody species, burning back woody shrubs. And it's going to be, all the native plants are fire resistant, and some of their seeds actually need fire, to germinate. A lot of the legumes can need fire. And so it's a really important tool, but it's generally not going to damage any of the fire adapted prairie species. And it's a misnomer that fire kills a lot of invasive species in trees. It really sets them back. That once a tree is over a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch, generally, or if it's got a really strong root system, it's just going to top kill something like calorie pear. And it'll be set back in bias time, but it's not going to get rid of an invasion of dogwood or sumac or calorie pear. It's just helping you manage the size and space of the invasives. I think the most important thing for folks to understand maybe is that it's a really cost-effective land management tool for us as land managers, that the timing and the planning and all of that takes some work, but the actual cost per acre to do a prescribed fire is quite low. If we let a landscape get out of control and we have to bring contractors and ourselves in with herbicide, and it can cost $3,000 to $4,000 an acre to clear cedars or remove bush honeysuckle, and gentle dormant season prescribed fires are really cheap. It's a good use of taxpayer dollars. And so I think that's important for people to know, is that it's really an efficient use of your tax dollars for the safety of cities and the quality of landscapes is to put fire on the ground. And it's a cheap way to do the work versus having to come back and do some really aggressive land management and try to turn things around versus infrequent good fire. And so it's a good, cheap tool. This is a unit that has multiple conservative plant species, things you would never find in a reconstruction. So there is New Jersey tea in this unit and prairie violets and all kinds of really neat plants that generally you don't see in high quality restorations. It's been abused, and we know there's a lot of damage, that spraying, haying, things that happened before we owned this property. But there's so many indicator species we know that this is a high quality, unplowed prairie. And it's got some neat prairie hyacinth on it. We've seen Michigan lilies on the site, huge areas of liatris, rattlesnake master. The unit does have a giant power transmission line through it. So one of our hazards today is going to be a 2 or 3 sets of wooden poles through the middle of the prairie. And so we're going to have to pre-burn all of those power poles, get those pre-burned, and then commence the rest of the burn. Every prescribed fire is different, and there's different tactics for different habitats. And we're not working in swamps here with helicopters and dropping, ignitions like that, or drone ignition. So that's not something we're scaled up to do. But generally on our prescribed fires on prairies, once we have a nice fuel reduction line around a unit, we are going to start a backing fire. And so we're creating an anchor point, and we're burning off all the fuel on the backside of the fire, burning with the wind. And we're creating an area that's a safe place for staff to hold. And then once we have that entire backing fire set and a safe area to work from, you're generally running 2 ignition crews, and that are going to be running flanking fires on the 2 sides of the unit if it was a square. And then once those flanks are burning nicely into the backing fire, we're going to light a head fire to cap the unit off, and that'll generally have more energy, and it's going to be running into the center of the unit back into the previous burned area. And so you're going to light that head fire once you've established control on the other 3 sides, and that's going to burn to the center, then extinguish the unit and put up a big column of smoke generally at the end. But if the goal is to not put up crazy heat and big walls of fire, you could run a backing fire all the way across the whole unit. And a private citizen, like I said, could eat your peanut butter and jelly and watch your backing fire, and you and your friends put it out when it gets to the other side. And so for us, it's more about efficiency, and we have 1,000 acres to burn in a year in the city that we've got to move. And so generally we're working at a pretty good clip to cap these units and move on to the next one. If we had the time, we'd probably work slower. There's a lot of planning involved, and especially in a community with 600,000 people. Many of our parks have ozone monitors, there are schools nearby, there are highways, every kind of infrastructure you can imagine. We have a park that is surrounded by a landfill, a Walmart, and a state highway. And so planning for our prescribed fires starts usually months ahead of time, and it involves getting permits from the county environmental office for pollution release. And then we have to get city-specific fire department permits, and some of those are as easy as a phone call and a handshake of, hey, you're burning today, great, and other are detailed reports. Since we're a park district, that means we are burning within Overland Park, Merriam, possibly Prairie Village, Overland Park, and further areas annexed south, the Northwest Consolidated area of DeSoto and Western Olathe, and then we even have Southwest Johnson County and District 1 outside of the Gardner area. So we could burn within 7 different fire agencies during a given year. City of Olathe is another specific one. But it requires making a burn permit. We have an internal burn permit process, and then getting the approvals the day of from the county for air quality, or the night before, to make sure we have permission to put emissions in the air. And it's an arduous process, but it could be worse. I've recently visited with folks in other communities that involved 70 people on a Teams call before they could do a prescribed fire. Prescribed fire weather is probably day of the biggest obstacle, is making sure it's within prescription. We have a goal of what we want to burn and how, and the winds and the smoke has to go where we want it to go. And so a lot of times a unit may not burn in a year because we can never get the correct fire prescription for that unit. You're looking at like where your smoke impacts are. And in more rural parks, it's a lot less important. If you have a rural park with lots of open space around them, the prescribed fire forecast is not incredibly constraining. If you're burning in the middle of a city, you really are completely constrained by your weather forecast. So There's lots of pre-planning, and then there's night before planning, and then there's alerting the neighbors and all the surrounding people that may be impacted, and social media, and then calling dispatch and fire departments and making sure everybody's on the same page. And then usually when you start a fire, then you find out if there's more people you need to call the next time.
I appreciate how in-depth all these considerations are, because safety is something that people often think about, right? Traditionally, people think fire, bad, dangerous. So
Sure.
appreciating some of those aspects of really planning for a safe burn. So let's talk a little bit more about safety considerations. How are prescribed fires controlled, and what are some precautions you take besides the pre-planning to ensure a safe prescribed fire?
Yeah, so making sure prescribed fire is safe is a lot about having good fuel reduction lines. And so generally, it's really important for us on the boundaries of a prescribed fire to remove as much thatch as possible. And so we have silage choppers and lawn mowers and hay rakes, and the goal is to have as little fuel on the edges of the fire as possible. And so that makes us use a lot less water. And so in a perfect world, if it's in the woods, you're burning off a trail, with a pre-made fire line. And generally with our big fueled prairie units, we're looking for a fuel reduction line where you cut the fuel in half, and then a really cut low line where there's no biomass. And so when the fire creeps out, even under low humidity conditions, you can generally get it under control. If it's a really thatchy, heavy fire line and it's full of fuel, it makes it really hard to get the work done, and dangerous for staff if there's multiple opportunities for spot fires. And then lots of signage is really important to make sure the public, before they get into the park, they're aware. Lots of signs that say, do not call 911, things like that. And we do have a lot of danger from looky-loos or from park visitors that when we have smoke conditions near roadways, our staff on fires could get hit by a car. And so there's a lot of radio communication about car traffic, and to make sure they're blocking roads and so they're unavailable, or if cars are passing through under smoke conditions, we're aware where they're at, and we have flashing lights on our vehicles and things like that. There's good fire. Like, we always talk about putting good fire down, good fire on the landscape. And so generally, in a wildfire situation, that a modern wildfire will burn into burn scars from previous wildfires where there'll be reduced fuels. And so fire managers know that when a wildfire moves into a landscape that's burned recently, it definitely drops the fuel loads. And they know that they have a better opportunity for containing a wildfire when there's been prescribed fires nearby. And so I know in Oklahoma, they had a wildfire near Stillwater a year or two ago that due to prescribed fire, it reduced the fuels as it encountered the town because of a prescribed fire. And so, yeah, putting good fire down prevents bad fire. And that's in Kansas, it's actually pretty common. Other parts of the country, prescribed fire is really hard to get down on the ground, and millions of acres burn in Kansas every year. In the Flint Hills in eastern Kansas, it's a very common private land management tool for cattle production and management of prairies and things like that. And so we have a lot of private burns here that have complex problems. And so the smoke in the Flint Hills may put Omaha or Lincoln, into an air quality crisis. And that's where the Flint Hills Smoke Management Plan shuts us down. And we can't burn in the city in April due to the amount of emissions that may come out of the Flint Hills in that time of year.
I'm Ellen Bruce. I am a seasonal natural resource technician at JCPRD. We do a lot of invasive species control. Sericea lespedeza is a huge one. We have Johnson grass season. Those are ones that we spray. A lot of thistles, musk thistles, a huge problem. Teasel. And then in the winter, we take care of more bush honeysuckle and cedar, red cedar removal.
So we do conduct growing season fires, but it is a very specific tool for our agency to manage Sericea lespedeza. So we have an exotic species here, and if we burn it in September and August, we can hit that plant right when it's flowering and at its weakest point. And we can also get it to try to germinate new seed and try to regrow without a lot of resources that it needs in late fall. And so we will take a unit that has a bad lespedeza problem and focus our prescribed fire timing on taking care of some really heavily infested units. But there are some trade-offs to that. So you could still have reptiles and amphibians that are above ground. And you can have grassland. It's past grassland bird nesting season, but it's also habitat for fall sparrows and things like that to move in. And so as long as you're making a mosaic and you're not working a growing season fire over too much landscape, same with monarch resources, so nectaring resources. So it's really important to make sure that we do a prescribed fire in the growing season, that it's targeted and we have a really good goal. And we understand there may be some collateral for a greater good for that prairie. And it's not something we overuse, and it's not something we use in an area that's already incredibly chaotic. So there's definitely trade-offs, and the smoke is generally really aggressive during a growing season fire with all the cool season acrid brome and fescue. It's very smoky, and so it extends our fire window because we do get cut off in April by the Flint Hills Smoke Management Plan. And so April 1st, we cannot burn in Johnson County due to the ignition of the majority of the Flint Hills. And so burning in August and September adds a little bit of calendar width for us to get more units done, but it's a very touchy, targeted tool. And so we've seen success, really strong success at Kill Creek and Shawnee Mission Park, using a combination of targeted herbicide and growing season fire to remove Sericea lespedeza. So it's really just a tool for us during the growing season for one specific plant.
At the end of October of 2025, Matt Garrett and I returned to a prairie area at Shawnee Mission Park that was burned to target Sericea lespedeza. Let's see how it looks.
This is a mature Sericea lespedeza plant that looks like it dropped seed a year ago. And you can see underneath that it for sure dropped seed, and then all of that seed due to the fire germinated. And so, there's maybe 30 plants that are growing off this plant from a year ago. And we will be monitoring these and coming back to these points and to see how many of these survive the winter and see what the die-off is. And if really the goal is after prescribed fire that 30 to 40 days later you need to come and spot spray the Sericea, might be something we need to move towards, is knocking it back, the vigor, removing all the blooms and all the seed-dropping plants, and then come back for all of the new germinated seedlings in the fall. Might be a new management technique for us, but we got to do a little more research to see what the winter survival rate is on some of these plants. I would expect this spring we'll see really strong penstemon digitalis and really strong milkweed growth, and we've seen the silphiums do really well the next season after a growing season or prescribed fire. I'd say they're early successional pioneers, and it opens up opportunities, lots of bare ground for seedlings. And so that's why it's a real measured tool, as you're opening up a lot of bare ground in early restorations or weedy areas. And so you have to be real careful with how you use the tool. And so we'll open up ground for bumblebees and like ground nesting critters to have open space, but you're leaving bare soil in the fall and opening up opportunities for maybe some of the more problematic species. And so it's something you have to monitor and then come back and do other kinds of management to make sure you stay on top of it. If you're expecting growing season fire to just manage woody growth or keep Sericea at bay by itself, there's other tools that need to be used, like haying and spraying and things like that. I may have staff come down here and deal with an area like this.
And what would you have them do? Like spray it?
Yeah, so an area this big, we might put a triclopyr product like Pasture Guard or Remedy Ultra on all of these. If they're still photosynthesizing and we still have some growing conditions, into early November, we might target an area like this for chemical control still this fall.
So fall is a great time for invasive species removal practices, but how late can you apply herbicide in the landscape?
We're really at the end of the season, and so this, for us, would be probably the last application we would do in a given year. Might be a zone like this where you're looking at maybe a couple thousand Sericea plants that germinated from the fire that we might be doing a targeted spot spraying. And the benefit to having the growing season fire was you germinated them all at once. Instead of, if this unit wasn't burned, you would have, the seed can last 20 years. And so you would just have decades of seed just continuing to come up slowly and surely. So we pushed it and kind of woke all of the Sericea seed up we can. And so that's where you end up having to target your efforts in a zone like this where you need a serious Sericea problem, but you have to manage it in the next year and a half.
As we've seen, prescribed fire isn't just a restoration tool. It's a living tradition that connects us to the history of this landscape and the future of our prairies. Today we explored the role of fire in maintaining grasslands, the differences between dormant season and growing season burns, and ways individuals can safely learn and participate in prescribed fire practices in their own communities. Now, we're excited to continue the conversation with our guest expert. We'll be diving deeper into best practices, training opportunities, and what it means to steward fire responsibly in today's world. Okay. Matt, I'm going to welcome you back to the virtual stage. We have many questions in the Q&A for us. So folks, if you have questions about large land management practices, specifically with prescribed fire or invasive species management, go ahead and put them in the Q&A section and we will get started. Okay, so our first question is from Daniel Katie. Is burning so asking about the Sericea lespedeza. Let's go into it a little bit more. Is burning effective with Sericea? And again, discuss the best times to do it and what the follow-up steps would be.
Yeah, so there's a lot of research out of K-State showing the benefits of doing a late growing season fire to manage Sericea. And it's going to reduce the vigor, and it removes almost all of the seed from that year. And so when you hit those flowering plants, you've removed an entire cycle of that Sericea's growth. And the real question that we're trying to answer right now is how many of the seedlings that start germinating and start growing late in the year actually survive the winter? Do they have the nutrients to make it to the next season? So we've got some survey plots, and we're going to be going out next season and seeing how many of these plants survive the winter and what it looks like the next year. So yeah, the alternative is somebody with an all-terrain vehicle spraying herbicide on every single plant, which is incredibly expensive and has a lot of side effects as well. So like I said in the video, it's a targeted tool, and it really has to be used in August and September, and it will remove an entire season of the Sericea.
Awesome. So on a similar topic about Sericea, lespedeza, and other invasive species, Anonymous asked, how soon should one plant pioneer species after a burn to help crowd out invasive? So maybe talk about putting seed down, and then do other native plants actually help impede the growth of invasive species?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like a human body. A healthy person can resist infection generally versus a sick person. And so a prairie is no different. So if you have a really resilient, balanced, well-managed, high quality prairie, it resists invasive species quite well. And then it gives you an opportunity to target small populations before they get out of control. But when it comes to, if we're going this winter, we're doing targeted overseeding. And so, yeah, we're going to be burning a unit off. And then in February or March, we're going to be putting down a high volume of native seed on some of our earlier restoration or maybe some failed plantings, and trying to kickstart those with late in the dormant season, dumping a lot of wildflower seed, way more than you would usually start a prairie with. So yeah, we'll be overseeding some of our units within a month or two after a winter fire.
Nice. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the transmission lines at the Cedar Nile Prairie burn. So
Yeah.
Keegan and Kathy have questions about that.
They scare the crap out of you.
They do, because when I was trained also with Missouri Department of Conservation, I remember them saying, avoid.
Yeah.
So, let me read both Kathy and Keegan's questions. They're related. Kathy says, I thought you couldn't burn under the wires. And Keegan says, what permissions or permits are required from utility companies to burn an area with power cables running through it? Both great questions.
None.
None. You don't need any permissions. Okay.
But I will say Evergy takes things very seriously. And They have a really good slideshow that makes prescribed fire managers very alert. They will show you videos where poles have been burned and they're gone, and you can see them floating in the air in a prairie. And Evergy has a great presentation on what not to do. And so, yeah, best practices for us are to pre-burn under all the poles and release just a little bit of smoke at a time. And we don't keep a lot of people under the power lines, and we move quickly. If it was cedars and heavy, acrid, oil-filled smoke, it could be pretty dangerous. But we just make sure nobody spends a lot of time under them, and we're not burning in dangerous conditions. And we're just spending a lot of prep time making sure that those poles are safe and that we're not keeping people under the lines, and we're not putting up really acrid smoke that could arc down to us. And so it's definitely a watch out situation for the safety of staff and for Evergy. So we are very cautious, and we are very slow. We spent as much time that morning that you visited with us burning around those power lines
Yeah.
as the entire fire took. And so that happens at Bull Creek and other places where we'll spend forever burning around gas lines and burning around power poles and other watch out situations, and making sure that we can move on with the rest of the fire and all that infrastructure is safe. So it's slow and it's tedious. You can hear those power lines humming.
Mhm.
So it's something that, yeah, we move very cautiously with.
Good to know. Matt, maybe I could have you share that Evergy presentation with me later so we can
Sure.
share it with our audience members in the show notes following today's program. Kathy, also a follow-up question from Kathy Hoyer. How long before you can leave the burn site knowing that it's cooled down completely? What does that process look like for you?
Yeah, so prairies and woodlands are wildly different. So as soon as a prairie fire is over, you can touch the ground and it's cool. And there's rarely anything. By the time we load our equipment up, we're usually pretty good to go, unless there was a brush pile or something we'd have to watch out for. But within an hour, a prairie is cold to the touch. The fire you visited with us at Lexington Lake, there was still snow on the ground after we completed the burn. We burned a unit full of tall grass, and when we were done, there was piles of snow still in the field. Prairies, it's very quick. Woodlands can take days.
Mm.
So I know there was a fire at Rocky Point Glade in Swope Park where, 3 or 4 days later, there were still oak trees on fire in the woods. And so we have to get our brush truck and our water pumps out, and we have to extinguish and spend, days putting out woodland fires. So the interior of woodland fires can burn for a really long time. The dream is to have a rain event or a snow event like the day after a forest, unit that would put itself out. But yeah, prairies within the hour are safe to move on from.
Awesome. So that's actually the perfect segue because Christine Garhart is asking more about, would like more information about woodland fire. Can it help manage winter creeper and Japanese honeysuckle in those areas?
To a limited extent. Just like when we're burning in prescription, you're not really burning in the kind of red flag conditions that historically would have seen fire move across a landscape. And so we'll see Japanese honeysuckle cook and you'll hear it pop and the oils and those vines will burn. But that plant is still going to be back next year. You've reduced its vigor and its size. Winter creeper, I've rarely seen take a strong hit from fire. It's got such a waxy cuticle, and it's so resilient, and it usually grows in places that don't have really thick fuels. So I think it'll definitely reduce some of those exotic species, but it's not going to fully control them.
Okay. Let's pause here real quick and go ahead and do our pop quiz before we answer the rest of our questions. Folks, if you have any other questions that you'd like to ask Matt, feel free to put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them here in just a moment. So I'd like to also mention that Deep Roots has our end of year growing season survey. We would love for you all to complete this survey to help us improve our programs, not just our webinars, but also our Habitat Garden tours, our Discover Native Gardening sessions, our Nature Advisors program, all the above. Give us your feedback. You can either take a photo of the QR code or check your email with the resources I'm going to send you later today that will have the link to that survey. Okay, and now the rules of our pop quiz. Let me get situated here. So first, before I read the question, I want you all to access the webinar chat and make sure you select in blue It'll say two, and then I want you to select the word everyone because we need everyone to see your answers in order for you to win this awesome Smokey the Bear poster on Why Be Careful with Fire in the Forest, the floral edition. Okay, and the first person to answer this question correctly will win that poster. Here's your question. What percentage of native prairie biome is remaining in the United States? Wow, y'all are fast. You all are fast. Let's see. So the answer I'm looking for is 4%. That percent is key. So that would be Zoe C. I don't know if I will pronounce your last name correctly, but Zoe, go ahead and respond to the email I'm going to send out later today with your address. You are our lucky winner, and congratulations. All right, let's jump back into our Q&A section. Okay. So Val Frankowski always has some great questions for us in our webinars. Thank you, Val. And she's asking specifically about burn plans. So you already covered this in the video aspect about what goes into a burn plan, but can you talk a little bit more specifically about like a situated parcel of land that's near roads and residents? And then once a burn plan is made for a parcel, is it something that's filed away and can be used again for a future burn, or do you have to recreate a new plan every time you do a fire?
Yeah, so every agency is different. We are a park district, and so we are not a federal firefighting agency or state agency, and we don't have to follow some of the very exhaustive standards that some larger organizations do. But yeah, we've got like a 5 or 6 page written burn plan that is going to cover hazards, and it's going to control wind direction and smoke management, and then assets and everything we're going to have on a fire. So we have to get all of that filled out. And then at the same time, we have a GIS layer where we have the boundaries. And then we have like fire effects, and we go out after the fact and can take photos. And we are going to make sure that it's inputted because I've been burning in Johnson County for 15 years, and I have no idea how many times I've burned a unit. And so making sure that we know the fire cycle, it's all digital for us now. So that's an important tool for us. And so if I left tomorrow, a new natural resource manager could see the frequency that hang and burning and what kind of disturbance we put on the landscape has been used on every corner of our 10,000 acres. So I've worked really hard to digitize all that. So the fire cycle for every landscape is now digitized. So it's really important for us to know where they are and how frequent they are, and then those burn plans are saved, and then they're adjusted by wind conditions and weather conditions. And sometimes we'll add a piece of woods next to a unit, and so we'll alter fire plans. Or sometimes I have a unit that has burned every year for the last 10 years, but we turn the compass. And so one year we burn half of it north south. The next year we'll burn half of it east west. And so a quarter of it has always rested 1 to 2 years. And so we're rotating where the fire goes on that unit every year. So I'd say the bulk of the burn plans stay the same with some tweaks to them.
That's great. And what important historical data that you have collected for future use.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. And
Yeah.
I was
Yeah,
gonna say, and the landowner could do that too. And I
yes,
think that's so
100%.
valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, Google
Good.
Earth is a great tool. Have an Excel spreadsheet of the conditions when you burned and what were the fire effects, because not all fire is good. If you have a dogwood or a sumac problem and Ceresia, and you do a really hot fire late spring, like you're actually making your situation worse
Ooh,
by making some of those clonal species angrier. And you may have reduced their height, but you didn't do anything to slow them down. So fire timing really matters depending on what your goals are.
awesome. Okay, so we have time for a few more questions. Um, so anonymous attendee wants to know, earlier on in the video, you talked about some of the cool indicator species you would see on the prairies. They're wondering if you could mention a few indicator species to look out for in Overland Park and Olathe area. I'm assuming they're talking about prairie, just given the context of today's program, but
Sure. So the number one I would talk about would be Mead's milkweed. that we have in a couple prairies in western Johnson County, kind of in the Olathe Overland Park area. But like fire is essential for the persistence of Mead's milkweed. Like Mead's milkweed cannot survive without fire, and it needs large populations of its species and multiple stems blooming at once, or it won't survive. And so doing the largest fire possible in the dormant season for meads is really important, to have as many blooms for it to thrive and cross pollinate. And so mead's milkweed is the first one that comes to mind for me, is that it's federally threatened, it's globally rare, and it's here in Kansas City. And so without fire, we lose mead's milkweed. And so Kill Creek Prairie has it. Lexington Lake Prairie, where that snow ice fire you saw, has meads. And when we burned that unit for the first time that we knew of in recent history, it had, I think, almost more stems of meads than the entire state of Missouri, probably. It had hundreds of stems of meads on it. So it was really exciting to try to help that species be stable on a site by making sure it sees some fairly frequent large scale fire.
So cool. Braggadocious moment, but I did get to see Mead's milkweed. I think it was out at, does Kill Creek Park have
Yep.
a small population?
Yep.
I think last spring, I was like, I'm making a point to go out and meet this Mead's
Yep.
milkweed, and it was very cute. So
Yeah, and
really
it did great back when there were millions of acres of prairie. It's not a plant that was adapted to live in little pockets. It was meant to have millions of acres and lots of fire, and it is hanging on by a thread due to private and public land managers using prescribed fire as a tool. But yeah, it's not a stunning huge plant.
No, it's not. It's very tiny. I was surprised for such a big, conversation about it. I thought that was interesting. Okay, so I have one more question for you, Matt. Beverly is asking if about different resources available. I don't know if there's any financial resources available, but could you also talk about how people can get trained, or any of the associations you might want to shout out to for folks to get
Sure.
involved with?
Yeah, so I guess Kansas has prescribed burn associations, and there's one here in Eastern Kansas for like Johnson, Miami County. And it's a group of private citizens and neighbors that work together to burn. And so they've got a Facebook page, and they get together, and you'll see an email saying, the Smith Prairie or the Smith pasture is going to burn next week, and we need everybody to show up. And they generally have tools and trailers and accrued equipment that they work together on things like that. So you'll see those across Kansas and I believe Missouri as well. And then you've got organizations like KC Wildlands that invites fire trained volunteers that have taken basic Missouri conservation fire classes or something with Kansas Forest Service. They get to go out and help burn public land. And then, as you saw, Courtney and Ryan from Native Lands, they're inviting folks out to private landscapes to help other citizens burn their units. And so between the publicly available classes in Kansas and Missouri, there are some of these nonprofits where you can actually join in and help. And compared to the Western United States, like fire is a tool you see in our region, and it's so common and so popular here as a land management tool that we're really lucky and gifted to have the flexibility where we have fire departments. We just call them and say, hey, we're going to burn today. And they're like, cool, have a great day. And that's the extent of it with some fire departments. And so it's just a different landscape than on some other parts of the United States.
That gives me so much pride for our region here. And that was one of the things I really gleaned from this episode. I was like, wow, we do this. Like as a region, we use fire as a tool. And I was surprised to hear that not many others do. So hopefully they will understand the value and get with it. So okay, well, thank you, Matt, and thank you everyone for tuning in today for Curious by Nature with Deep Roots. We hope you enjoyed today's program, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.